The ache began, as it always did, as a low hum behind her sternum. It was a familiar ghost, a constant companion for 3 years, 1 month, and 12 days. Ilara knew the exact tally because she marked it on the calendar of her mind, a secret anniversary of the day she realized her friendship with Chloe had morphed into something deeper, something vast and terrifying and utterly consuming. Tonight, the ache was a sharp, insistent thing, a shard of glass twisting with every word Chloe spoke. "He just doesn't. Listen," Chloe said, her voice a thread of frustration woven into the soft fabric of their shared living room. She was curled on the opposite end of the worn floral sofa, a mug of now-cold tea cradled in her hands. The lamplight caught the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, turning them into miniature constellations. To anyone else, she was a picture of casual discontent. To Ilara, she was a masterpiece of unspoken sorrow. Ilara made the appropriate sympathetic noise, a soft murmur that had become her primary language in these conversations. She was the keeper of Chloe's relationship woes, the steady shoulder, the patient ear. It was a role she had perfected, a mask she wore with such skill that she sometimes forgot the face beneath it was screaming. She was the world's foremost expert on Chloe's heart, and the one person who could never be allowed to claim it. "It's like I'm speaking a different language," Chloe continued, tracing the rim of her mug with a slender finger. "I talk about wanting to travel, about maybe taking that pottery class, and he just nods and talks about his promotion. It's like he hears the sounds I'm making, but not the meaning. Not the me behind them." "I hear you," Ilara thought, the words a silent shout in the cavern of her chest. "I hear every dream, every fear, every tiny hope you whisper into the dark. I have a whole library of you inside me." Instead, she said, "Have you told him that?" It was the safe question. The friend question. Chloe sighed, a gust of wind that seemed to extinguish some of the light in her. 1,000 times. It's like trying to teach a rock to fly. Mark is good. He's reliable and kind and my parents love him. He ticks all the boxes. But the boxes aren't the whole story," Ilara finished for her, the sentence worn smooth from overuse. They had had this conversation, or a version of it, more times than she could count. It was their ritual. Chloe would hit a wall with Mark, and she would come to Ilara to trace the cracks. Ilara would offer plaster and paint in the form of careful advice, all while her own foundations crumbled. Exactly, Chloe looked at her then, a real look, one that saw past the role of supportive friend for a fleeting, dangerous second. The intensity of that gaze was a physical force, pinning Ilara to the cushions. "You always get it. You always know what I mean before I even finish the sentence." Ilara's heart did a painful little flip. "We've known each other a long time," it was a weak defense against the truth. The truth was that Ilara didn't just know Chloe, she studied her. She knew the subtle shift in her tone that meant she was hiding a deeper hurt, the way her left eyebrow twitched when she was genuinely amused, the specific scent of vanilla and rain that clung to her hair after a shower. The memory of their first week as roommates surfaced, unbidden. They were unpacking boxes, surrounded by chaos, laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Chloe, covered in a light dusting of cardboard particles, had pointed a finger at her, a playful glint in her eyes. "Okay, rule number 1 for this arrangement," she had declared with mock seriousness. "We're going to be best friends. We're going to live in each other's pockets. So, whatever you do, Ilara, don't catch feelings. It would make things way too complicated." Ilara had laughed and promised, her heart light and unsuspecting. The irony was a bitter pill she swallowed daily. She had broken the one rule, the only rule, and now lived in the complicated wreckage of it every single day. Chloe shifted on the couch, tucking her feet beneath her. The movement brought her a few inches closer. Ilara's entire nervous system went on high alert, cataloging the change in proximity. The air between them suddenly felt dense, charged with unspoken things. It was always like this. A gravitational pull Ilara fought against with every fiber of her being, and that Chloe seemed entirely, blissfully unaware of. "Maybe I'm the problem," Chloe mused, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Maybe I'm just expecting too much. A movie-style romance. The kind that doesn't really exist. Ilara's throat felt tight. It exists, she wanted to say. It's right here on this couch, breathing the same air as you. It's quiet and patient, and it would never make you feel like you're speaking another language. I don't think wanting to be heard is too much to expect, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. She was a professional liar, after all. Lying to Chloe, lying to herself. Chloe offered her a small, grateful smile that felt like a punch to the gut. It was a smile of pure, uncomplicated friendship. A smile that solidified the wall between them, brick by painful brick. Ilara felt like a ghost haunting her own life, visible but not truly seen. She watched the person she loved more than anything search for happiness everywhere, but in the one place it was being offered, unconditionally and in silence. The silence stretched, comfortable for Chloe, excruciating for Ilara. In it, Ilara could hear the frantic beat of her own heart, a drum signaling a frantic retreat. She had to keep her distance. She had to maintain the carefully constructed facade of their friendship, because the alternative, confession, rejection, losing Chloe entirely, was a chasm too terrifying to contemplate. The friendship was a kind of starvation, but losing it would be a true death. "You're the best, Elle," Chloe said, her voice soft with affection. She finally uncurled herself, stretching like a cat. "Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you." Each word was a beautiful, perfect nail hammered into Ilara's coffin. She just smiled, a hollow imitation of warmth. "Anytime." The hum behind her sternum swelled into a full-blown orchestra of pain. 3 years, 1 month, and 12 days. And counting. The stasis didn't just exist on the couch. It permeated every corner of their shared apartment. It was in the way Ilara made coffee in the morning, always remembering that Chloe liked a whisper of cinnamon in hers, a detail Mark had never managed to retain in 4 years of dating. It was in the space on the bookshelf where Ilara's poetry collections bled into Chloe's dog-eared fantasy novels, a silent conversation between their two worlds. Their lives were interwoven, a tapestry so intricate that Ilara feared pulling a single thread would unravel the whole thing. Mark was a presence more than a person in their home. A ghost of cologne left in the hallway after he dropped Chloe off, a second toothbrush by the sink that felt like an intruder, a name that dropped into conversation and immediately lowered the temperature of the room. Ilara had tried to like him, for Chloe's sake. She had listened to his long-winded stories about market analytics and feigned interest in his golf handicap. But all she could ever see was the way he looked at Chloe and missed. He saw the beautiful, vibrant surface, but he was blind to the deep, complex ocean beneath. He admired the painting, but had no concept of the artist. This particular evening, after Chloe had gone to bed with a final, weary sigh, Ilara stayed on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that still held the faint scent of Chloe's perfume. The apartment was quiet, but her mind was a cacophony. She replayed their conversation, dissecting every word, every glance, every shift in posture. It was a form of self-torture she engaged in regularly. Had that look meant something more? Was that slight hesitation a crack in the facade of her obliviousness? The answer was always no. Chloe saw her as a fixture, a permanent and reliable part of her life, like the sturdy old sofa they were sitting on. She was comfort. She was safety. She was home. But she was not and had never been an object of desire. That long-ago joke, "Don't catch feelings," had not been a warning. It had been a statement of fact, a boundary drawn in the sand that Chloe had never imagined Ilara would be foolish enough to cross. Ilara closed her eyes, the ache in her chest a familiar weight. She imagined a different world, a parallel universe where she was brave. In that world, she would have reached across the couch, taken Chloe's hand, and said the things that were burning a hole in her soul. "It's me. The one who listens, the one who sees you. I'm the one you're looking for." But bravery was a currency she did not possess. Fear was her native tongue. The fear of shattering the most important relationship in her life was a powerful sedative, keeping her quiet, keeping her still. So she remained the supportive friend, the keeper of secrets, the silent lover. She would take the scraps of affection Chloe offered, the easy smiles, the casual hugs, the late-night confessions, and pretend they were enough to sustain her. She would starve as long as she could do it by Chloe's side. The catalyst arrived on a Tuesday, disguised as a rainstorm. It had been hammering against the window panes for hours, a relentless percussion that matched the anxiety thrumming in Alara's veins. Chloe was out with Mark, a forced date night designed to patch over the cracks that had been showing for weeks. Alara was pretending to read a book, but her eyes had been on the same paragraph for 20 minutes. Every rumble of thunder was the sound of her own dread. Her phone buzzed at 11:10. It was a one-word text from Chloe. Here. Alara's heart leaped into her throat. She hadn't heard Chloe's keys in the door. She rushed to the entryway and pulled it open to find Chloe standing on the welcome mat, soaked to the bone. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her hair, plastering it to her pale cheeks. Her mascara had run, leaving dark tracks down her face like rivers of grief. She wasn't holding a purse or a coat. She was just there. A shipwreck washed up on their doorstep. Chloe? Alara's voice was a whisper. Chloe looked up, and the raw, unshielded pain in her eyes was a physical blow. She didn't say a word. She just stepped inside and collapsed into Alara's arms, her body racked with a shuddering sob that seemed to come from the very core of her being. Alara's arms closed around her instinctively, holding her tight. Chloe felt impossibly fragile, like a bird with a broken wing. The front of Alara's shirt was instantly soaked with cold rainwater and hot tears. The professional, practiced distance Alara maintained simply evaporated. There was no room for it here, not when Chloe was falling apart in her arms. Hey, I've got you, Alara murmured, stroking her wet hair. It's okay. You're safe. I've got you. She guided Chloe's trembling form toward the living room and eased her down onto the sofa. Chloe clung to her hand, her knuckles white. Her sobs were quieter now, but no less devastating. They were the sound of something ending, something breaking irrevocably. It's over, Chloe finally choked out, the words muffled. Me and Mark. It's done. A complicated, treacherous wave of relief washed over Alara, followed instantly by a crushing tide of guilt. She pushed the relief down, focusing only on the woman in front of her. What happened? She asked softly, keeping her voice even. The same fight. The same one we always have, Chloe said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture of futility. Except this time he said it. He said he feels like he's always being compared to someone else. That he can never measure up to some impossible standard I have. And he asked me who it was. Alara's blood ran cold. I couldn't answer him, Chloe whispered, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere over Alara's shoulder. I couldn't say anything. Because I didn't know. And he saw that. He saw it and he said he was done trying. He packed a bag. He's staying at his brother's. Alara's mind was racing. This was it. The tectonic plates of their lives were shifting. But the aftershocks were terrifying. She had to be careful. She had to be the friend. I'm so sorry, Chloe, she said, and she meant it. She was sorry for Chloe's pain, for the tearing apart of a 4-year relationship, no matter how flawed. She squeezed the hand she was still holding. Do you need anything? Tea? A blanket? Chloe shook her head, then looked at Alara, her eyes wide and lost, like a child in the dark. The look was so vulnerable it made Alara's heart ache. I didn't know where else to go, she said, her voice cracking. My car was at his place. I just ran. I walked here in the rain. The only place I wanted to be was here. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and significant. It wasn't just about a physical location. It was about a person. Alara was her safe harbor. Of course you came here, Alara said, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. This is your home. She stood and grabbed the Afghan from the back of the armchair, draping it around Chloe's shivering shoulders. She bustled around, making tea, finding a dry towel, her movements a way to dissipate the nervous energy crackling through her. When she returned, Chloe was huddled under the blanket, looking small and broken. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the rain and the soft clink of Chloe's spoon against her mug. The storm outside was beginning to subside, but the one inside the apartment was just gathering strength. Then, Chloe looked up, her expression unreadable. "Can I ask you something stupid?" "There are no stupid questions tonight," Elara replied gently. Chloe hesitated, biting her lip. Can I stay with you tonight? In your room?" She rushed to explain, as if sensing the sudden stillness in Elara. "It's just, my room feels so empty. And I don't want to be alone." "I know it's weird, but—" The world tilted on its axis. Elara's bedroom, her sanctuary, the one place that was entirely hers, was about to be invaded by the one person who occupied all the space in her heart. Her bed, which had only ever known her solitary form, would now hold the source of all her secret longing. It was a terrifying, exhilarating request. It was crossing a line. "It's not weird," Elara heard herself say, her voice sounding distant, as if it belonged to someone else, someone braver. "Of course. Come on." She led the way down the short hall to her bedroom. The room was simple, a bed, a nightstand, a bookshelf overflowing with books. It smelled like her lavender and old paper. Chloe followed her like a shadow, clutching the blanket around her. Elara gave her a dry t-shirt and a pair of worn sweatpants to sleep in. While Chloe changed in the bathroom, Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was happening. This was real. She pulled back the covers on her queen-sized bed, the sheets cool and crisp. It suddenly felt enormous and impossibly small at the same time. When Chloe emerged, she looked even smaller in Elara's clothes. Her hair was towel-dried and starting to curl at the ends. The vulnerability in her face was a raw, open wound. Without a word, she crawled into the bed, curling up on the far side, facing away from Elara. Elara took a deep breath and slid in beside her, keeping a careful, deliberate distance between them. The heat radiating from Chloe's body was a palpable thing, a magnetic force pulling at every cell in Elara's body. She lay stiffly on her back, staring at the ceiling, her senses overwhelmed. The scent of Chloe's shampoo on the pillow, the soft sound of her breathing, the sheer, undeniable fact of her presence here in Elara's bed. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Elara thought Chloe had fallen asleep when a tiny, choked sob broke the silence. "Elle?" Chloe's voice was a thread in the darkness. "I'm here," Elara whispered back instantly. There was a rustle of sheets, and then Chloe had rolled over. Elara didn't dare to turn, didn't dare to look. She could just feel the shift in the mattress, the change in the air. "I'm scared," Chloe whispered. The admission was so simple, so raw, it broke through the last of Elara's defenses. She turned onto her side to face Chloe. In the faint moonlight filtering through the blinds, she could see the glisten of fresh tears on Chloe's cheeks. "I know," Elara said, her voice barely audible. "But you're not alone." Chloe's hand moved then, hesitantly, across the small gulf of sheets between them. Her fingers found Elara's, cool and trembling. She laced them together, her grip surprisingly strong, an anchor in the storm. A current of pure electricity shot up Elara's arm, straight to her heart, which stuttered and then restarted at a frantic pace. It was too much. It was not enough. It was everything. Chloe didn't pull away. She held on, her breathing slowly evening out, her sobs subsiding into the occasional shudder. Elara lay there, perfectly still, holding Chloe's hand in the dark, feeling the entire landscape of her life irrevocably alter with each beat of her heart. The stasis was shattered. Something new and terrifying and full of a dangerous, fragile hope had begun. The days that followed were a study in liminal space. Chloe existed in a state of quiet grief, moving through their apartment like a phantom. The breakup with Mark had hollowed her out, but in that new emptiness, something else was beginning to stir. Elara watched, waited, and held her breath. Their dynamic had shifted in a way that was both subtle and seismic. The line drawn that first night in Elara's bed had been erased, and they were now navigating an uncharted territory without a map. They fell into a new routine. Chloe slept in Alara's bed every night. It began as a silent, unspoken agreement. After the first night, Chloe had simply gathered her pillow and walked down the hall to Alara's room, her expression so fragile that Alara couldn't have turned her away even if she wanted to. Which she didn't. Every night was a sweet torture. They would lie with a careful foot of space between them, two separate islands in a sea of white sheets. But as the nights passed, the distance began to shrink. A foot became 6 inches. 6 inches became 3. Sometimes, Alara would wake in the middle of the night to find an arm flung across her waist or Chloe's hair tickling her cheek. In those stolen moments of unconscious intimacy, Alara felt a sense of rightness so profound it frightened her. Their conversations deepened, veering away from the immediate aftermath of Mark and into more abstract, more intimate territory. They happened late at night, propped up against pillows in Alara's bed, the only light from the street lamp outside casting long shadows on the walls. "What do you think real love is supposed to feel like?" Chloe asked one night, her voice soft in the darkness. She was tracing patterns on the duvet with her finger, a gesture Alara had come to recognize as a sign of deep thought. Alara's heart clenched. It was a question aimed directly at the secret she kept locked inside her. "I don't know," she began, choosing her words with excruciating care. I think it's supposed to feel easy. Not the work part of it. Relationships are always work. But the being part. Being with them shouldn't feel like you're playing a role or trying to fit into a shape that isn't yours. It should feel like coming home." She risked a glance at Chloe. Her friend, her roommate, her bedmate, the love of her life, was looking at her with an expression of intense concentration, as if Alara were speaking a profound truth she was hearing for the first time. "Coming home," Chloe repeated, the words a soft echo. "I've never felt that. With Mark, it felt like I was always visiting. Always on my best behavior, you know? Worried I'd track mud on the carpet." "You deserve to be able to track mud on the carpet," Alara said, a small smile touching her lips. Chloe's answering smile was a fragile, beautiful thing. "Yeah, maybe," she shifted, turning more fully to face Alara, propping her head on her hand. The movement was casual, but it brought their faces inches apart. Alara could count the freckles scattered across her nose. She could smell the mint from the toothpaste they shared. Her breath caught in her throat. "You've never really talked about anyone you've dated," Chloe observed, her gaze searching Alara's. "Not really." "Why is that?" The question was a landmine. Alara's dating history was a short, unremarkable list of men she had tried to feel something for, all of them pale imitations of the connection she felt sitting right here. "Nothing much to tell," she deflected, her voice a little too tight. "Just never clicked. I guess I haven't found my coming home person yet." "Liar," a voice screamed in her head. "She's right here." For a heart-stopping moment, Chloe's gaze dropped from Alara's eyes to her lips. It was a flicker, a barely perceptible shift, but to Alara, it was a lightning strike. The air crackled. The space between them became a supercharged vacuum, pulling them closer. Alara's mind went completely blank. All she could think was, "She's going to kiss me." But then the moment passed. Chloe blinked, as if waking from a trance, and a faint blush colored her cheeks. She cleared her throat and rolled onto her back, breaking the spell. "Well, whoever he is, he'll be lucky," she said, her voice a little strained. The casual inclusion of he was a small, sharp sting. Alara turned away, her own cheeks burning. Hope was a dangerous, addictive drug, and she had almost overdosed. The physical contact, once limited to those unconscious nighttime touches, began to spill over into the daylight hours. It was innocent, yet charged with a new significance. Chloe's hand would find Alara's arm to emphasize a point in a story. When they watched movies on the sofa, Chloe's head would inevitably find its way to Alara's shoulder. One evening, as they were cooking dinner together in the small kitchen, their hands brushed as they both reached for the salt. Instead of pulling away, Chloe's fingers intertwined with Alara's for a brief, searing moment. It lasted no more than 3 seconds, but it imprinted itself on Alara's skin, a brand of heat and possibility. Alara became an archaeologist of small gestures, excavating meaning from every lingering touch, every soft glance. She saw a change in Chloe that went beyond post-breakup sadness. There was a new softness to her, a vulnerability she had never shown when she was with Mark. She seemed to be unfurling, petal by petal, and she was only doing it for Alara. One Saturday afternoon, they were sitting on the living room floor, sorting through a box of old photos Chloe had brought back from her parents' house. The room was filled with the dusty scent of memories and the golden light of the late afternoon sun. "Oh my God, look at this," Chloe laughed, holding up a faded Polaroid. It was a picture of them from college, arms slung around each other, grinning wildly at the camera. They were so young, so unaware of the complicated path that lay ahead of them. "We look like babies," Alara said, smiling at the memory. "We were," Chloe agreed, her voice growing quiet. She continued to stare at the photo, her thumb stroking over the image of Alara's face. The gesture was so tender, so unconscious, that it made Alara's heart ache. "You know," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper even then, "you were the person I felt safest with. The person I could be my whole, messy self around." She finally looked up from the photo, her hazel eyes deep and serious. I think maybe Mark was right. I think I was comparing him to someone. I just didn't realize who." The confession hung in the air, a fragile, shimmering thing. Alara's entire body went still. This was it. This was the precipice. She could feel the ground giving way beneath her feet. She had to say something, had to acknowledge the monumental weight of Chloe's words, but her throat had closed up. The front door buzzer shrieked, shattering the moment into 1,000 pieces. Both of them jumped. Chloe's face clouded over with a familiar anxiety. "That'll be him," she said, her voice flat. "Mark. He's dropping off the last of my stuff." The spell was broken. The golden afternoon light seemed to turn gray. Alara felt a wave of irrational anger towards the man on the other side of the door, the man who had impeccable timing for ruining everything. She watched as Chloe's face shifted, the soft vulnerability replaced by a guarded, tense mask. She was putting the armor back on. Alara retreated to her room while Chloe dealt with the exchange. She could hear the low murmur of their voices, polite and strained. It was the sound of 4 years of history being condensed into a few cardboard boxes and a stilted farewell. When she finally heard the front door click shut, she waited a few minutes before emerging. She found Chloe standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the sad artifacts of her former life, a box of kitchen gadgets, a framed photo of them on a beach, a stack of his old sweatshirts she had claimed. She wasn't crying. She was just staring at the boxes with a look of profound, dawning realization. "You know what's weird?" Chloe said without looking at Alara. "I thought I would be devastated. Seeing him, getting this stuff back. I thought it would break me all over again." She paused, picking up one of the sweatshirts and holding it as if weighing it. "But I don't feel anything. It's like looking at the belongings of a stranger. The only thing I felt when he was here was a desperate wish for him to leave so I could come find you." She turned to face Alara then, her eyes shining with an emotion that was too bright, too raw to be anything but the truth. The escalation was over. They had reached the peak, and there was nowhere to go but over the edge. The weeks after Mark's final visit were a tightrope walk over a canyon of unspoken feelings. The air in the apartment was thick with it, a low hum of electricity that made the hairs on Alara's arms stand up. Chloe had named the ghost in her past relationship, the unnamed person Mark could never measure up to, but she hadn't given it a face. Not yet. And Alara, paralyzed by a hope so fierce it felt like terror, did the only thing she knew how to do. She started to pull away. It was an act of self-preservation, a desperate retreat to safer ground. She started finding excuses to be out of the apartment. She took on extra shifts at the bookstore where she worked, stayed late at the library pretending to study, and took long, meandering walks that ended nowhere. She couldn't bear the intensity of their new dynamic, the way Chloe's eyes followed her around the room, the charged silence that fell between them. Every shared glance felt like a question she was too afraid to answer. Most pointedly, she started making excuses to sleep in her own bed again. Alone. The first night, she'd mumbled something about needing to catch up on sleep without being disturbed. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. She lay awake for hours, the other side of the bed a cold, empty expanse that mocked her. She could feel Chloe's presence through the wall, a silent, wounded question mark. After 3 days of this careful, painful avoidance, Chloe cornered her. Ilara had just gotten home from a shift, her emotional armor firmly in place, and found Chloe waiting for her in the living room. The television was off. The lights were low. Chloe was sitting on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked like she was preparing for battle. "We need to talk," Chloe said, her voice quiet but firm, leaving no room for argument. Ilara's heart sank. She slowly took off her coat, her movements stiff. "Okay, sit down," Chloe instructed, patting the cushion next to her. It was not a suggestion. Ilara sat, keeping a careful distance, her body language screaming her reluctance. She stared at her own hands, unable to meet Chloe's gaze. "You've been avoiding me," Chloe stated. "It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact. You've been hiding from me for a week, and I want to know why." The directness of the question was a punch to the solar plexus. Ilara had no defense against it. She searched for a plausible lie, a deflection, but her mind was a blank slate. "I haven't been," she started, but the words died on her lips. It was too flimsy a lie, even for her. "Don't," Chloe said, her voice softening, but with an edge of steel. "Don't lie to me, Elle. Not now. Not after everything. Something shifted between us after Mark brought my stuff back. And ever since then, you've been a ghost." "What is it? What aren't you telling me?" Ilara finally forced herself to look at Chloe. The hurt and confusion in her friend's eyes were a mirror of her own turmoil. The truth was a wild bird beating its wings against her ribs, desperate for release. But letting it go felt like jumping off a cliff. "It's complicated," she whispered, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. "Then uncomplicate it for me," Chloe insisted, her voice pleading. "Because this silence is 100 times worse than whatever it is you're so scared to say. I feel like I'm losing you. And that's the one thing I can't handle right now." The raw vulnerability in Chloe's admission chipped away at Ilara's resolve. The fear of losing her by speaking the truth was warring with the certainty of losing her by remaining silent. Taking a shaky breath, Ilara decided to tell a sliver of the truth, a version she hoped would be safe. "I'm just worried about you," she said. "You've just gotten out of a long relationship. You're vulnerable. And I don't want to take advantage of that." Chloe stared at her, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Take advantage? What are you talking about?" Ilara's courage faltered. She couldn't say it. She couldn't form the words. She just shook her head, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. But Chloe was relentless. She moved closer, her knee brushing against Ilara's. She reached out, not to touch, but just to hover her hand in the space between them, a gesture of gentle invitation. "Is this about us sleeping in the same bed? Is it about the way I lean on you? Because if it is, you need to know that it's not about me being vulnerable, Elle. It's about you." The bird in Ilara's chest beat its wings harder. "This past month," Chloe continued, her voice dropping to an intense, earnest whisper, "being with you, really being with you without the buffer of Mark. It's woken something up in me. Or maybe it's just made me finally see something that was there all along." She took a deep breath, like a diver preparing to plunge into deep water. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. About what you said, about love feeling like coming home. About why I was always comparing Mark to someone else. And about that stupid joke I made when we first moved in together." Ilara's head snapped up. Her eyes met Chloe's. "Don't catch feelings," Chloe recited, her voice thick with regret. "God, I was so stupid. So blind. It never even occurred to me that I should have been saying that to myself." The world stopped spinning. The air left Ilara's lungs in a silent rush. "Chloe," Ilara breathed, her name a prayer. "I think," Chloe's voice trembled, but her gaze was unwavering. "I think I might not be as straight as I've always thought I was. And I think it's because of you. It's always been because of you." It was a pre-confession, a declaration of intent. It was everything Alara had ever dreamed of hearing and everything she was terrified of. The hope she had been trying to starve was now a roaring bonfire, consuming all her fear, all her doubt. And the reason I'm telling you this, Chloe went on, her words gaining speed, tumbling out in a rush of newfound clarity, is because I need to know if I'm crazy. I need to know if what I've been feeling, what I think I've been seeing in your eyes when you look at me, if any of it is real. Because if it's not, I think I might actually lose my mind. She finally closed the small distance between them, her hand landing softly on Alara's knee. The touch was a brand, a point of anchor in a swirling sea of emotion. So please, Chloe whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Tell me what you're not telling me. The dam broke. The carefully constructed walls Alara had spent years building were washed away in a flood of emotion so powerful it left her breathless. The truth, raw and undeniable, surged forward. I'm in love with you, Alara said, the words tasting of freedom and terror. They were quiet, barely more than a breath, but they filled the entire room, the entire universe. I have been for 3 years, 2 months, and 21 days. The specificity of it, the sheer weight of all that time, hung in the air between them. Chloe's eyes widened, a flicker of shock followed by a wave of something so profound, so deeply resonant, it looked like recognition. It looked like she was seeing Alara for the very first time. Oh, Chloe breathed. Oh well. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say it was too much. She didn't recoil. Instead, a slow, wondrous smile spread across her face, a dawn breaking after a long night. It was the most beautiful thing Alara had ever seen. 3 years, Chloe whispered, a note of awe in her voice. You've been feeling this for 3 years? And I never knew. The regret in her voice was palpable. All those nights I cried on your shoulder about him. God, Alara, what that must have been like for you. It didn't matter, Alara said, her own tears finally beginning to fall, hot and cleansing. As long as I could be there for you, it was enough. No, Chloe said, her voice fierce, her hand tightening on Alara's knee. It wasn't enough. It's not enough. Not for you, and not for me either. I've been settling for black and white my whole life, and I never even realized you were standing right next to me, offering me color. The metaphor was so simple, so perfect, it stole Alara's breath. Chloe's gaze, which had been so full of questions just moments before, was now clear and certain. The confusion was gone, replaced by a resolute purpose that was both thrilling and terrifying. She was looking at Alara in a way she had only ever dared to imagine in her most secret dreams. Chloe's other hand came up, her fingers gently, hesitantly tracing Alara's jawline. Her touch was featherlight, but it sent a cascade of fire through Alara's veins. Every nerve ending was alight, screaming with a mixture of disbelief and dizzying joy. This was real. This was happening. I've been so stupid, Chloe whispered, her thumb brushing over Alara's bottom lip. The intimate gesture sent a jolt straight to Alara's core. So incredibly blind. The answer was always you. Every time I said something was missing with Mark, the thing that was missing was you. The way you listen. The way you see me. The way your hand feels in mine. The mutual confession was complete, a perfect, mirrored set of truths laid bare on the worn fabric of their sofa. The years of quiet pining, the weeks of confused awakening, it had all led to this single, crystallized moment of absolute clarity. Chloe's face was so close now. Her breath was warm against Alara's skin. Her hazel eyes, flecked with gold, were vast universes of emotion, regret, wonder, and a deep, burgeoning affection that mirrored Alara's own. The world had shrunk to the space between their two bodies, the inches between their lips a canyon of longing that was about to be crossed. Alara, Chloe breathed, her name a question, a plea, a promise. Her gaze dropped to Alara's mouth, and this time, it stayed there. The air grew thick, heavy with anticipation. The silence was no longer empty, it was filled with the frantic, synchronized rhythm of two hearts beating as one. Then, she asked the question that would change everything, her voice a raw, vulnerable whisper. Can I? She didn't need to finish. Alara knew. Her answer wasn't a word, but a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the permission Chloe needed. Chloe closed the final inch between them. The first touch of her lips to Alara's was impossibly soft, tentative, a question mark rendered in flesh. It was a whisper of contact, a moment of pure, heart-stopping disbelief. For a second, Alara was frozen, her mind struggling to accept that this fantasy, polished to a fine sheen by years of secret longing, was actually happening. Then Chloe made a soft sound in the back of her throat, a murmur of discovery and relief, and the pressure of her mouth deepened. It was no longer a question, but an answer. A statement. And with that, Alara's paralysis shattered. She met the kiss, her own lips parting slightly, a silent surrender. It was not a kiss of frantic, pent-up passion, but something far more profound. It was a kiss of recognition. It was slow and deep and breathtakingly gentle. It tasted of salt from their shared tears and the sweet, familiar scent of Chloe herself. It felt like coming home. Alara's hands, which had been clenched into fists in her lap, came up to cup Chloe's face, her thumbs stroking the soft skin of her cheeks. She could feel the slight tremor in Chloe's body, or maybe it was her own. Chloe's hands moved from Alara's knee to her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them at all, just the press of their bodies and the connection of their mouths. The kiss deepened further, becoming more certain, more urgent. The initial hesitation melted away, replaced by a current of need that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. It was a conversation without words, a story told in the movement of their lips. It spoke of lonely nights and unspoken desires, of patient waiting and sudden, glorious revelation. It was 3 years of silence being broken in the most beautiful way imaginable. When they finally pulled apart, it was only for the necessity of air. They didn't move far. Their foreheads came to rest against each other, their eyes closed, their breath mingling in the small space between them. Alara's heart was a wild, frantic drum against her ribs. She could feel Chloe's heart hammering in time with her own. "Oh," Chloe breathed out, the word a puff of warm air against Alara's lips. "Wow." Alara let out a shaky laugh that was half a sob. "Yeah, wow." She opened her eyes to find Chloe already looking at her, her expression one of pure, unadulterated wonder. The gold flecks in her eyes seemed to be glowing. That felt, Chloe started, then stopped, searching for the right word. Right, Alara finished for her, the word a simple, perfect truth. "So right," Chloe confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. She leaned in and pressed a second kiss to Alara's lips, this one shorter, softer, a seal on the promise the first one had made. "God, it's always been you." The aftermath of the kiss was a strange and wonderful landscape of fragile new beginnings. They remained on the couch for what felt like hours, not speaking much, but communicating in a language of soft touches and rediscovered glances. Chloe's hand was intertwined with Alara's, their fingers tracing idle patterns on each other's skin. The fear that had been Alara's constant companion for so long had receded, replaced by a tentative, shimmering joy. But beneath the joy, a new kind of anxiety began to surface. "I'm scared," Alara admitted into the quiet of the room, the confession feeling like a necessary anchor to reality after the dizzying flight of the last hour. Chloe's grip on her hand tightened reassuringly. She didn't look surprised. "Me too," she whispered, her voice honest and clear. "I'm terrified. I feel like I just woke up from a long dream and I don't know any of the rules in this new world. My entire life, I've been following a map that someone else drew for me. Go to college, get a job, find a good boyfriend, get married. And I threw the map into the fire." She turned to look at Alara, her expression earnest and a little lost. "What do we do now?" The question was both enormous and simple. Alara felt a surge of protectiveness, a desire to make this easy for Chloe, but she knew it wouldn't be. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. I guess we figure it out together. One day at a time." "One day at a time," Chloe repeated, testing the words. A small, determined smile touched her lips. "I can do that. As long as I'm doing it with you." That night, for the first time, when they went to Alara's room, it wasn't as friends seeking comfort. It was as something new, something undefined and precious. They lay facing each other in the dark, the space between them gone completely. Chloe's arm was draped over Alara's waist, her head tucked into the curve of Alara's shoulder. It felt so natural, so profoundly correct, that Alara wondered how she had ever lived without it. "Can I tell you something I only just realized?" Chloe murmured against her collarbone, her voice sleepy. "Anything," Alara whispered back, her fingers gently combing through Chloe's soft hair. "All those fights Mark and I had," Chloe began, her voice thoughtful. "They were always about the same things. He didn't like that I wanted to spend a quiet night and instead of going to some loud party. He didn't understand why I'd rather have a deep conversation than just watch whatever action movie was on. He thought it was weird that I knew exactly how you took your coffee, but I'd forget his favorite sports team." She paused, and Alara could feel the moment of dawning comprehension as it washed over her. "I wasn't just comparing him to you," Chloe said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. "I was measuring our entire relationship against what I had with you, and it always came up short. The ease, the understanding, the safety. I had it all right here. I was just too blind to see that it was love. Not friendship. It was love, the real kind." The confession was a balm on the old, secret wounds of Alara's heart. All the times she had felt like a second choice, a convenient comfort, Chloe was recontextualizing them, painting them in the vibrant colors of a love she hadn't yet had the language to name. "I'm so sorry it took me so long to see it," Chloe whispered, her voice thick with regret. "Hey," Alara said softly, tilting Chloe's chin up so she could see her eyes in the dim light. "Don't be sorry. You got here. That's all that matters." They made a decision that night, a quiet pact whispered in the dark. They would try. They wouldn't put a label on it yet, not until Chloe had time to fully process the monumental shift in her own identity. But they would be together. They would explore this new, beautiful thing that had blossomed between them, and they would face whatever came next as a unit. It was a promise of patience, of understanding, and of a shared future. It was more than Alara had ever allowed herself to hope for. 3 months later, the world was a different color. The tentative, fragile hope of that first night had solidified into a steady, quiet confidence. The fear had not vanished entirely, it still lingered at the edges, a shadow of what-ifs and societal pressures, but it was dwarfed by the simple, overwhelming joy of their new reality. The apartment, once a stage for pining and confusion, was now a sanctuary of domestic bliss. They had fallen into a natural rhythm that was an evolution of their old friendship, now infused with a tender, easy intimacy. Alara woke up on a Saturday morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of Chloe humming softly in the kitchen. The other side of the bed was empty but still warm. She smiled, stretching languidly under the covers, a feeling of deep contentment settling in her bones. This was her life now. Waking up in a bed that was theirs, not just hers. Waking up to the certainty that the person she loved most in the world was just in the next room, making coffee for them both. She padded into the kitchen to find Chloe standing by the counter, bathed in the morning sunlight streaming through the window. She was wearing one of Alara's old band t-shirts and a pair of shorts, her hair a messy halo around her head. She turned as Alara entered, and her face broke into a smile so radiant it made Alara's heart skip a beat. "Morning, sleepyhead," Chloe said, her voice warm and bright. She held out a mug, cinnamon already sprinkled on top. "Morning," Alara replied, taking the mug. Their fingers brushed, and the familiar spark of electricity was still there, a constant, happy hum beneath the surface of their skin. She leaned in and kissed Chloe, a soft, lingering press of lips that tasted of coffee and home. "Thank you." "Anytime," Chloe said, her smile deepening. She leaned back against the counter, sipping her own coffee, her eyes full of a placid happiness that Alara had never seen in her before. The hollowness that used to haunt her gaze was gone, replaced by a light that seemed to shine from within. "What are you thinking about?" Alara asked, watching her. Chloe's gaze drifted around their small, sunlit kitchen. "I was just thinking about how different everything feels," she said. "It's not just that I'm happy, which I am. So happy she looked at Alara, her expression sincere. It's that I feel whole. Like there was a piece of me missing my entire life, and I was trying to fill the space with all the wrong things. And then I found it. It was you. You were the missing piece. Alara felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest, but it was no longer the ache of longing. It was the warmth of a love that was returned, a love that was safe and real. I feel the same way, she said softly. Like I was living in grayscale before, and you turned on the lights. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee, secure in their shared understanding. The boxes of Mark's things were long gone, donated to charity without a second thought. The ghost of him had been fully exorcised, not with anger or bitterness, but with the quiet, powerful presence of a love that was simply a better fit. Later that day, they were curled up on the sofa, the very same sofa where so much of their story had unfolded, reading their respective books. Chloe's leg was draped over Alara's, her head resting on Alara's shoulder. It was a scene of perfect, unremarkable domesticity, and to Alara, it was the most exciting, wonderful thing in the world. Chloe closed her book with a soft sigh and tilted her head back to look at Alara. "Remember that stupid rule I made when we moved in?" she asked, a wry smile playing on her lips. Alara smiled back. "The one about not catching feelings." "The very one," Chloe confirmed. "It's funny. I thought I was setting a boundary to protect our friendship. But all I was doing was telling the most important person in my life not to fall in love with me, while I was already halfway there myself without even knowing it." She reached up and tucked a stray strand of hair behind Alara's ear, her touch gentle and proprietary. "I'm so glad you're a rule breaker," she whispered. "I'm not the one who broke it first," Alara teased gently. "You're the one who kissed me, remember?" Chloe's smile widened into a grin. "Best decision I ever made," she leaned in, her lips brushing against Alara's. "And I'm going to keep making it." The kiss was soft and sure, a reaffirmation of everything they had found together. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes the most terrifying risks led to the most beautiful rewards. It was the closing of one chapter, filled with quiet pain and misunderstanding, and the beginning of another, one that promised a lifetime of sunlit mornings and shared mugs of coffee. As Alara kissed her back, she thought about the long, winding path that had brought them here. She understood now that all those years of waiting, all those moments of silent aching, hadn't been a waste. They were the foundation upon which this new, stronger love was built. She had learned Chloe's heart by heart long before she was ever allowed to hold it. And Chloe had been searching for a home that was right in front of her all along. They had both been a little lost in their own ways. But now they were found. Together. And Alara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that they were both exactly where they needed to be.